Thanks for listening to this Enrichment with the Gifted Guy. In continuing to talk about executive functioning skills are the skills that we use in order to accomplish our goals. These goals may be very small, these goals may be very large, but we do need to use executive functioning skills and sometimes several executive functioning skills in order to reach this goal. So, one goal we've been talking about is the idea of working on a project. And ironically enough, the first thing you do when you do a project is you plan and you set a goal. So, you have this plan, and this is my goal. This is what I want to accomplish. We also talked about the idea of then chunking this into smaller pieces. So, if you have a long term goal, rather than looking at it in the long term, look at it piece by piece by piece by piece. It makes it more manageable. And then you have to prioritize those chunks. Which one has to go first? Which one has to go next? So, if you set that all up in the beginning, having this goal directed persistence is a little bit easier. And this is why it's easier because some of the tools you'll use to have this grit to finish as a result of these. Because anytime you work on a project, you are often going to hit what's called the dip. The dip is when you start a project, you're gung ho, you're excited, you want to get things done. But eventually, because you're working on it and things become tedious or things become they don't work as well as you think they should, you start to kind of lose your motivation. Even things you're really excited about, you might lose motivation on. So, how do you then kind of buckle in and then push through this? How do you show that grit? Well, one thing, if it comes to your planning, is you kind of try to anticipate obstacles. So, what could go wrong? So, let's say, for the sake of argument, you're working on a project that involves making slide deck, and you create your slide deck, and whatever one thing happens, you can't anticipate it, and you lose a couple slides. Well, some people might let this setback make them stop. But if you've planned, if you saved your notes on what went into that, or you made a backup, or someone else had a copy, then you've anticipated this obstacle, and it's not going to be so bad. So you have to try to figure out like what could go wrong, and what are some things we can put in place to anticipate what could go wrong, to make it better when it does go wrong. The next thing is because you're looking at this far finish line, you have to have a finish line to be heading towards. But if you've chunked it into smaller parts and you're having difficulty pushing through, don't look at the finish line. Look at the next part of the chunk because that's more attainable, that's more achievable. So say, okay, I'm not going to go to the finish line, but I'm going to go to this. And then once I get to this chunk, I'll go to the next one. And then once I get there, I'll go to the next one. And again, it makes it much easier to be able to push through because you're not pushing through to the very end, you're just pushing through to the next chunk. And then you're regaining your steam and then you're pushing through to the next chunk. And pretty soon, once you get through a certain amount of chunks, you've gotten to the end. And it didn't seem so bad because you were doing a little bit at a time. The last one is you have to make sure that you manage your frustration. So when things don't go your way, or you have this plan and you've done everything that you can possibly do and things still go wrong, one of your reactions cannot be to quit. I'm done. I'm not pushing any further. I'm finished. You have to say to yourself, okay, this didn't go as planned, but because I had a backup plan, because I had a plan B and a plan C, I anticipated these obstacles. I know where to get back on. Because I've put things into chunks, it's not this huge problem anymore. It's just one problem. Then I get to the next one and the next one. So you have to realize, you have to have this awareness that you do have something in place that allows you not to just give up, or it doesn't seem like overwhelming. It doesn't seem like it's unattainable. There's still a chance to get it done. And you manage this frustration by being able to see that next part of the project. And so those are some ways that you can use goal directed persistence. Again, you have to have the goal. That's the key because that's the finish line that you drive toward. And when you chunk it, you set smaller goals and you achieve each one of those goals until you get to that final. You also want to make sure that you leave, and part of this anticipating obstacles is you want to give yourself a day or two to finish early in your plan to make sure that if things don't go exactly what you want, you can go back and finish them. So you might limp across the finish line, you might crawl across the finish line, and it does not as good as you want it to be. But if you left yourself a couple of days or some time to go back, you can go back and make it better. You can gather perspective when you get finished, do a little reflecting. You'll go back and say, what can I do now to make this better? Sometimes just finishing it is a huge accomplishment. So just get it done and then go back and fix it. You don't have to get it perfect and then get it done. You can just get it done and then you can go back and make sure that you improve it.